When Hoyo first revealed Honkai Nexus Anima as their next project in the Star Rail concert a few months ago, we all assumed it would play similar to Pokemon in some way because of how they featured the creature-human pairs that were clearly a take on Pokemon and their trainers. Well, months later, Nexus Anima had its gameplay revealed to the world, and to everyone's surprise, it has Autochess style combat, which is definitely not something Pokemon is known for. We've had past event minigames in this style for Genshin and Zenless Zone Zero, but having it be the primary form of gameplay is completely different. As someone who has played plenty of TFT with both a competitive and casual mindset, and now has access to Nexus Anima's first closed beta test, I feel pretty equipped to explain why this was an extremely confusing direction to take a gacha game from an outside perspective. In case you're unfamiliar, Autochess started with a Dota 2 mod that coined the original name. While other auto battlers exist, the main mechanics that this game established is what would go on to inspire the many others to come after. The most popular one by far is the one based on League of Legends champions called Teamfight Tactics, or TFT for short. As the Autochess name implies, your units battle all on their own with no direct instruction from the player. If you've never played before, that probably sounds extremely boring, but where the game lacks in mechanical skill, it more than makes up for in strategy and decision making. You're in charge of drafting a team composition composed of units with different trait synergies that get increasingly stronger with more unique units. Meanwhile, each unit has a special ability, rarities that correlate to general power level, and item builds made from combining components. You have to also balance your economy because you have a limited amount of gold to use to buy units, refresh the shop which determines what's available to you, and buy levels that increase your unit cap while raising your shop's rates. Then there's unit positioning, augment selection, competing with other players for the same units, and more. So while there is a degree of randomness to the game that can create rare highlight moments for even new players, the nuanced complexity of it makes it so that experienced players can completely destroy those who don't know what they're doing. But like most other online multiplayer live service games, a major component of TFT's replayability is the fact that you play against other people in an 8-person free-for-all. Although the shop encourages randomness by default, the need to be smart with your economy and play certain team compositions in different scenarios comes from the pressure of 7 other players trying to knock you out of the game. This creates an infinite amount of possible game states to try and navigate through, keeping the game fresh, at least until a new set comes out that completely changes the units, traits, items, and gimmicks. However, if you've played any Hoyoverse game before, you know fully well that they completely avoid PvP for their main game modes, relegating it to only side minigames. And this makes a lot of sense because generally speaking, spending more money in gachas means having more power, and being pay to win isn't exactly a highly desired quality in multiplayer games. TFT does have a gacha-like system to spend money on rolling for avatars and arenas that are purely cosmetic with no in-game advantage, but that's only possible because people really enjoy the game and want to show off to others. So how does Nexus Anima approach a compromise between keeping the spirit of the genre while focusing solely on PvE? To answer the first question you probably have, the first beta does not have its gacha system implemented yet, which is consistent with how Zenless Zone Zero's didn't add it until later, but it appears that in the final release it will be how you acquire characters, called Cardia in this game. In battle, you can equip up to 3 at a time, with each one providing a unique item that can be freely moved around between your anima. Additionally, the first slot has a leader skill that provides additional bonuses at the start of a combat round, which can range from summoning an extra unit to buffing your strongest attacker. In combat, anima function exactly how you'd expect. They auto-target, have basic attacks that can crit, cast spells with mana costs, and have defensive stats for the 2 types of damage. They are categorized into 3, 4, and 5 stars, but most anima are collected in the overworld by fighting them, with some requiring extra side quests, though others were locked behind long-term goals, and a few were available in the shop. In battle, you actually have every single one available to you at all times, with the dex showing 66 in the current build. Thankfully, there are team presets and filters available for you, so you don't have to scroll through the entire list if you know what you're looking for. This may sound like it removes all of the complexity of Autochess if you can just immediately draft the best team available, click battle, and win, and to be honest, the early game does pretty much feel like that. It mainly consists of individual battles with either a wild anima or a trainer called animasters in this game, and they're very straightforward. Some did have minor stipulations to them, but in general, the typical slow introduction of mechanics that gacha games tend to have in the beginning, combined with the non-interactive nature of auto chess, made the first 3 hours quite repetitive and simply not very engaging. It feels like there's a lot of cool ideas here, like the collection aspect of Anima feeling very Pokemon-like and incentivizing exploration, but then integrating those systems together leads to some disconnects. For example, you aren't really incentivized to experiment with adjusting your team until you get a whole bunch of new synergizing units. Most of the Anima you get in the early game share the aspect of satiation, which gives the whole team healing every few seconds. Why would I try switching out an old Anima for a new one when I'd only be downgrading one of my active buffs? Then there's the progression system, which is also more similar to a typical RPG than I expected. The level of your units, which determines how high their stats are, is equal to your account level, rather than the standard of drafting multiple copies to upgrade in rank. And at level breakpoints, the number of Anima you can field permanently increases. On the one hand, this creates a unique sense of progression, but on the other hand, the early game focuses way more on getting past the grind, rather than taking the time to learn the mechanics. So it probably sounds like I just hate this game, and well, in the beginning, I kind of did. But once you get past that painfully slow early game, suddenly you are encouraged to mess around with different strategies that do allow you to overcome level gaps. When you finally have enough different Anima to experiment with, that opens the door to discovering cool things like knocking an enemy into a group so that your AoE hits more enemies at once. When you are given a very specific modifier to play around, you have a team comp available to you that can properly take advantage of it. You can also permanently increase stats of units by feeding them, or equip them with non-refundable abilities called strands. So while I did warm up to the game as I progressed, there was genuinely one thing that really made me think, okay, this game seriously has potential to be good. This is the Apex Club mode, which functions way more similarly to what you'd expect from a PvE auto chess game. You have to reach a certain number of round wins, and you can only lose a limited amount of rounds before losing the entire run. The number of units you can field, as well as the number of cardia you can use, increases as you get further in. There are augments called Gauntlet Principles that will completely change how you approach making your team composition. In my first run, I took one that gives me 2 non-attacking units with items that give them the satiation aspect, allowing me to reach 8 satiation when I otherwise wouldn't be able to. In my second, I took one that super buffed my backline attacker Boba Burb, and so he was my solo damage carry who I supported with a front row of bodyguards. And while Nexus Anima forgoes the usual unit shop, it provides its own take on the concept with an item shop containing 3 different rarities of stuff. Here you can buy levels for all your units, with it being more cost effective for smaller categories, equipment for your units, consumable upgrades to give to a single unit, unit specific skill upgrades, and even increased team size. This poses an interesting dynamic where you can invest in early power spikes or save up for the later rounds to cash in on big upgrades. This system also rewards you for playing flexibly, as utilizing what the game gives you will lead to saving more coins instead of re-rolling, so you can buy more total upgrades. Also, the cardia you use are not locked and can be changed at any time, allowing you to instantly choose the best lineup for the given situation. For example, the 5-star Parayaya Sovereign has an insane leader skill that does 20% max health true damage to all enemy units, but if you're fighting only a single enemy, the 4-star Jalili Bilal has a strictly better skill that does 30% max health true damage to one random enemy. This game mode actually manages to capture the essence of what makes TFT fun, all while removing the pressure that comes with a timer and facing real opponents. I don't think they'll ever add PvP to this game, because if you wanted that experience, you'd probably just play TFT. This is providing something completely new. Maybe it's because I was still a low rank, but it did seem really easy to snowball into an easy win just by choosing synergizing augments, but I could definitely see how it could become more challenging. Especially if they continue to expand on it with more mechanics, I can see it being a really enjoyable endgame mode that will test a player's skill in a similar way to how TFT does. So although I had kept on wondering why they'd ever take a gacha game in this direction, now that I've played it, I kind of get it. The large overworld integrates the anima fairly well, with you being able to find them in the wild, and each having an ability, such as being a bounce pad, mount, or glider. That said, it very much doesn't cross into Genshin's territory, which has way more diversified exploration, environments, and collection aspects. And if they went with turn-based combat similar to the mainline Pokemon games, that would likely end up being a bit too close to Star Rail's turn-based-esque gameplay. So Autochess combat avoids any semblance of overlap, while also expanding Hoyo's library of games to an untapped audience. Not just TFT, but also its mobile Chinese counterpart, Battle of the Golden Spatula, is insanely popular, with it reportedly beating out Genshin and Star Rail individually in 2024 revenue. And it doesn't really have any competition, especially on the PvE front, as TFT has only had limited time events for it, making for some pretty big opportunities. So even though the main combat will be very polarizing in the sense that many people will absolutely hate it, and that's okay, there definitely will be a player base for the type of game that Nexus Anima is. After playing the game for around 8 hours, I'll admit that I think I might have been a bit too negative in the beginning. Alongside my complaints about the early game pacing, the story aspect of being an amnesiac and having the ability to go back in time didn't really appeal to me, and the implementation of the playable characters was a bit disappointing in that some lacked models or animations. But these are all things that will most certainly receive major overhauls across the next few closed betas. The parts that will stay consistent are the genre and style, and in those respects, the game shows a lot of promise. Despite being such an early build, the UI looks fantastic, the protagonist customization is limited but shows a lot of promise with unlockable outfits, taking selfies with new anima is cute and being able to nickname them is funny, and the world is a lot bigger than I expected it to be. Some things like the graphics and performance clearly need a lot of work, but I think that makes sense given that I'd imagine most of the effort up to now was put into the creature designs, which I found myself to be very impressed with. But this guy, where's the extremely satisfied button? I need that one. And how the units function, which show a lot of promise, with only one anima that really made me think, okay, that's literally a carbon copy of Misfortune from TFT. Nexus Anima won't be for everyone, and that's okay because even if you are a diehard Hoyo fan, I personally think playing more than 2 gacha games actively at the same time can be pretty difficult to keep up with. But if you do enjoy the auto chess style of game, I think this will be worth at least giving a try when it finally releases in a few years' time. It's of course too early to say if the game will be free to play friendly or not, but at least in the current build, despite having very powerful buffs and items, the characters seem to have the least amount of impact in this game when compared to Hoyo's other titles. That could very well change later, but Nexus Anima is already shaping up to be very different from Hoyo's standard formula, so it's all up in the air. There were some other minor details about the game I chose not to go over in this video simply because they probably won't make it to the final release, and I really just wanted to hone in on the core mechanics. Well anyways, I hope you found this video to be interesting or insightful. Subscribe for more Hoyoverse game discussions, and as always, thanks for watching.